Well, welcome back, folks, here on Zupi the Autotelic Mindset Podcast. I'm here with Curtis Halladay, Paralympic rower, bronze medalist, Brazil 2016, and I believe you have a world champion bronze medal as well, if I'm correct, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Nice, awesome. Well, welcome on board, and thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks, happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive into this. Is quite the story you got. So I'm excited to get into it. I've had a couple Paralympians, but no one with this type of story you have. So I'm eager to learn more.
Yeah, well, that's the fun part about Paralympians is that we all got quite a bit of a different story. Just the nature of the sport, right? A lot of people were born with something different, or we had an accident, or what may be it, but most of us have a pretty interesting story, so that's the fun part.
That's cool. I'm sure you've met a lot of interesting people along your journey.
I have, yeah.
So kind of going over a little bit of your bio and stuff. You were growing up, you were quite the athlete. I think you said basketball, motocross, track and field. So kind of talk us through growing up, and then I want to kind of get right into is 2012 where you had a little bit of an accident. If you could kind of explain to us what happened. Obviously, like you said, yours a rare story here where, it's not something you were born with. It happened, throughout your teenage years, and obviously you don't plan for these things, but things happen. So talk about like just you growing up as an athlete, as a young kid, and, doing all the things us so-called normal people do as children in the world of sports. And then, take us through your accident and everything that kind of led to where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we can start way back. I mean, I've been, whether you want to call it an athlete or just someone who played sports as a kid growing up. My parents put me in hockey from the time I was 6 years old, kind of thing, and I only did that for a couple of years, but played soccer, and in elementary school played basketball and volleyball, and was just always active. And then into high school, same idea: basketball, football, volleyball, track and field. And throughout all that too, I raced motocross, and that was kind of my main thing, if you will. I started at a pretty young age. I think I got my first bike when I was 7 years old, and started racing by the time I was 10, I guess, and had a lot of fun with it. And when I was 17 years old was when I had the accident, so that would have been 2012. And so that was a huge turning point, as you can imagine. It kind of progressed as time passed as well, because no one was really sure of the full extent of the injury and how things were going to heal. So basically what had happened was I dislocated and broke my left hip. So it fractured the femoral head. It broke it in two. And the one big chunk was like flipped completely upside down and kind of somewhere in my groin, and they had to retrieve it in there.
Oh, wow.
So, and the impact of the injury, I guess it's pretty common for people when they dislocate their hips, more commonly in old people. They'll damage or stun the sciatic nerve, and it's usually a temporary thing. So they'll have like a temporary foot drop, and that's what had happened to me. So the surgeon was telling me, 6 weeks, and then 6 months, and then a year, and then after a year, he's kind of like, get used to it. It's just what it is. Again, sorry, I didn't give you much backstory on that, but my left foot is effectively paralyzed. I can push down a little bit with it, but I can't lift it up at all.
Okay. So when you're walking, do you walk with something, or is it a limp, or with a...
No, I just have like an AFO. It's an ankle foot orthotic.
Okay.
And it's just it's a brace that fits inside my shoe, and if I'm wearing pants, no one would ever really tell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go
ahead there. Sorry.
No, I was just going to continue on the story. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth with it a little bit, but
it's okay.
Yeah. So the injury was was 2012, and I guess it was about a year before I felt fairly normal again. You know, minus the fact that my left foot didn't work, and I had 3 surgeries on my hip to put it all back together, which was a complicated process in itself because there were some problems with the imaging and they didn't really know exactly what the extent of the injury was, and they tried to do closed reductions, which didn't work obviously, and they opened it up. That's when they realized the fracture, CAT scanned it, and then did the reconstructive surgery after that. So yeah, the recovery about a year later, I was in the gym at Laurentian University where I did my undergrad. I was part of like a weightlifting club, and you can picture a weightlifter. Maybe not short is maybe not the best descriptor, but I'm not the build of a typical weightlifter, to put it lightly. I'm 6'6" and pretty lanky, so the weightlifting coach was also the strength and conditioning coach for the rowing team, and he kind of nudged me and said, have you ever thought of rowing? And I was like, no, I've never once thought of it, never considered it. But then he introduced me to the coach, and that's kind of how all that started.
Cool. So I'll stop you there because I have some questions for you with regards to how this all happened. Just kind of going over like the mindset stuff. You're in the hospital bed. Obviously, there's a couple hours, a couple days before like the shock actually comes down to realize, okay, what's going on. And I'm sure, obviously, with some of the X-rays and all that, it took maybe a bit longer. But to like walk me, like kind of when you kind of came into realization what had happened, like what were you thinking as like a young teen? And then afterwards, knowing that, okay, my foot's not going to ever go back to normal, being just an active kid in general, like you said, like, and going through such an extensive recovery, at any time, did you like lose a sense of identity or a sense of purpose? Like, what do I do next? Where do I go from here? If you could kind of talk us through kind of the mental side of, I'd say, let's call it your recovery, and who you're going to become with what you were dealt with.
Yeah, so I'll just touch on the few points that you mentioned. So, racing motocross, it's a very dangerous sport, and we're not oblivious to the fact that accidents can happen at any point. So when I crashed, I knew it wasn't good.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where, not to be pessimistic, but statistically, it's a matter of time before you have a decent accident, right? And whether you injure yourself severely or not, that depends. But everyone has a good accident at some point. And, I had accidents before that were, they'd appeared to have been worse, but this one was, again, not a small accident, but just the way I had fell, it caused the injuries that it did. But I remember laying there on the ground. I thought at the time that I had broke my femur in half. Just as the first thing that popped into my head. I had a bunch of pain, like kind of mid thigh. That's kind of where it hurt, and it kind of seemed like a stinger. When you get like a really bad Charlie horse and it's almost numb and the pain hasn't set in yet. It's kind of like that. And I tried to move. I tried to roll over and push myself up, and I just felt everything out of place. So that's when I realized that it was not good. So as the pain started to kick, yeah, exactly. So as the pain started to kick in, I was, a little bit reactive. I think I punched the ground a couple of times and yelled and scared the kid that was doing the yellow flag to warn the other riders that there was a down rider. But yeah, so that's when I realized, right then and there that it wasn't good. And actually at that point, I felt the numbness kind of going down my leg into my foot. It started kind of like below the knee. And it was like an odd wave that was like slowly going down my foot. It was just becoming more numb to the point where I couldn't feel my foot like 20 minutes after the accident.
Wow.
And I again at that time, I remember thinking, maybe the way I'm laying I'm cutting circulation off or something, and it's just going numb because I'm cutting circulation off or whatever it might be, you know? So I didn't really think too much of it. I also was in a lot of pain, so, you know, to really analyze it wasn't the time to do it. But yeah, I think I'm trying to think of when it actually sunk in. But the only point that really, I would say, affected me in a momentarily negative way was what, a year after the accident, when the surgeon told me to get used to it, kind of thing, with my foot. Because there was always, you know, hope in the surgeon's eyes that the foot would recover, that my foot would recover, and the nerve would regenerate and come back. But it was a bit of a, you know, it wasn't too abrupt, because at first it was 6 weeks, then it was 6 months, and then it was a year. So, you know, you kind of clue in earlier on, but it was that point where I remember sitting in the doctor's office and I kind of was choked up a little bit. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? But like I said, it was a brief moment. It might have been that day, and then I kind of, you know, moved on. It's, what can you do at that point?
Yeah. And then what was the recovery process like? Like a lot of rehab, just or is it a waiting game to see if that nerve comes back?
There's things that you can do. You know, a lot of electrostim stuff, a lot of mental work, even, you know, thinking of your foot moving, or even just trying to move it, trying to send the signals.
Yeah.
Which I was doing a ton of. And just general physio, doing stuff on the right side too, because they were telling me that, you know, your body will kind of mirror itself.
Yeah.
So just working both feet at the same time, even if only one of them was moving. So all this stuff, I was doing all this stuff, and yeah, so that's all that I was made aware that could be done, and I was doing everything that I could.
Yeah. So there wasn't too much, like, you didn't have to do too much physical stuff to get something back. It seems all mental, really, like you said, like, you know, staring at your foot and trying to basically talk to your foot, right? What kind of, if you don't mind asking, like, what kind of doctor or what title would they have, like the person who's working with you that suggests something like that? What's the title of the doctor? Or is it just, was it your surgeon?
Most of it came from my surgeon, but I did see neurologists and specialists. Yeah, I had a bunch of nerve conductivity tests and EMGs. I'm forgetting the term. ECG is for your heart, but yeah, EMGs, I'm pretty sure, where they attach electrodes to you and try to see what's working and what's not.
So it's funny because, like, with sports too, like we talk about like visualization and stuff like that. So you definitely like tapped into something earlier on, whether you knew it or not, right? With, you know, visualizing, positive self-talk. What kind of like, were they like just try to send that signal and just say like move this part of your foot, or like what kind of constructive like feedback were they, like how are they asking you to do it?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, that's kind of how they explain it.
Okay.
Just say, try to move your foot.
Yeah.
And you know, visualize it moving.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, it was the same as if you were to just sit there and move your foot back and forth.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing. It's just not moving.
Yeah.
So everything feels the same except the fact that it's moving.
And like, is frustration, like, are you getting mad like through that time where you know, or you were just, you know, very, let's call it balanced, where you knew, okay, if I can get this to move, all right, but I know it might not.
Yeah, I think I accepted the fact pretty quickly that it wasn't working. So any improvement was positive, right?
Cool.
So it would have been easy to get frustrated with the fact that it wasn't normal, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's it,
I
it
hate saying that, but it's true.
yeah.
And any improvement was a positive. So
And I'm kind of like, as you're talking, I'm kind of like reflecting on, I have my performance engine and I have task, mental, physical, a lot of times both. And then we get into focus where you have enjoyment, enthusiasm, and acceptance. So I think in your case, like if you're not, if that acceptance part doesn't happen, I think that's where you go down potentially a dark rabbit hole, right? And like it can get pretty dark. I'm not going to say go into it, but yeah, if you don't, if you're not willing to accept what has happened and move on the best way you can, obviously easier said than done. Mentally, I mean, things can really escalate, and obviously this is for your case. But when I talk about acceptance, um, in sports, right, you're on a team, and one of your teammates makes a mistake, like you can't control what they do, but you're accepting that, the mistake was done, but like, let's move forward opposed to dwelling on it. And then I say that's when your performance, you accept it, can progress. And if you don't, it's going to hinder your performance. So it's kind of cool to put that term acceptance that's in my performance engine into what you went through and just helping you move past that this event, or else, like I said, things can become very difficult and frustrating, to say the least.
yeah, just to build on that, and I'm sure we'll touch on this later too, but it's just being brutally honest with yourself. And there's no escaping reality in any regards, right? Whether you're applying it to this circumstance, or like you said, if your teammate messes up, um, at that point it's reality, and there's no two ways about it. So you can either dwell on it, and then your performance in that moment then after is worse because
Yeah,
you're dwelling on it, or you can just accept it because that's what it is and do what you can do at that point, right?
yeah. I mean, it seems a lot easier said than done, but 100%. So now that I've kind of got a gist of the background here, now I'll kind of move forward from where you kind of left off in your story. You have a guy approach you. Why don't you try a sport you've never done before? Like, what was your what was kind of your thought there? Like, sure, I'll go try it, like based on your personality, or was it like, I'm not gonna that, forget it, or what were you?
Yeah. So at the initial comment, I was kind of like a little apprehensive about rowing. It just didn't
Yeah,
seem like something. It's nothing that I had ever considered before.
yeah,
And you see it on TV during the Olympics and the Paralympics, but I didn't really know anything about it at all. But honestly, I attribute the reason to why I decided to jump into it is just the timing of all of it, because I was about a year off of my injury, and I couldn't play any team sports anymore. I couldn't do running sports like I was doing before.
hmm
So I was a little lost, to say the least. I
yeah,
was working out a ton, just because I had no idea what to do with myself.
yeah.
So the timing of it was perfect, and it was an opportunity to get back into that team environment. So I just took it for that reason.
Awesome. Yeah, timing, and I always say like the universe has a plan for us. Things happen for a reason and line up. Patience is the key. So when you started, are you, because you're a Paralympic athlete, but in university, are you just on the team? Like it's a regular team.
Yeah,
There's no Paralympians or people
yeah,
who have a
there's
disability versus the other side. It's just you're
that's
on the team.
correct.
That's the way it is. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually didn't know I was eligible for the Paralympics until, I don't know exactly what the timeline was, but I want to say something like 8 months to maybe even a year by the time I got officially classified.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so, I mean, this is a new challenge for you to do a sport you've never done. So walk us through like the first couple weeks, months, and just learning how to row.
Yeah, that was frustrating. You want to talk about something frustrating? That was frustrating. So they start us off on the machine, and I'm sure you've been on a rowing machine.
Yeah.
So we call them ergs or
Yep.
ergometers. Um, yeah, to get the proper technique the way the coach wanted it was so frustrating, because you have these movement patterns that you've developed from rowing so improperly
Yeah.
before on the
Yeah.
machine,
That's right.
that
Yeah.
my coach should say, like, get on it, and I'd start rowing and she'd stop you like two strokes in, and you're immediately like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
So you start with just, your arms moving, and then you'll incorporate the body, and then you'll incorporate the legs. But it's all the sequencing that's a little bit counterintuitive. And it took, even to the point of right up to the games and even after the games, like you're always refining it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an improvement, but those first 6 months were frustrating and felt really long, but just kept showing up, and regardless of the frustration. But yeah.
What was kind of your what was your self-talk? Did you have a mantra? Did you have something just like, okay, keep pushing through, like I'll get there? What was your thought? Like, what was your mental talk going through that process? Learning how to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna back you up a little bit, but just to answer that quickly, I think it's just because I'm super stubborn. I can't, if someone puts something in front of me and I have a hard time with it, I'm gonna do it until I can do it right.
Gotcha.
Or even better, if someone tells me I can't do something, then it's just that's the ultimate fuel. But yeah, just to back you up a little bit, when I had that first meeting with the coach, so I was brought up. I was introduced to the sport basically directly through a program that existed called Road to Podium.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of in the form of the RBC Olympians, the RBC training grounds.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it was a rowing specific version of that.
Gotcha.
Before that existed, and it's all based on physiological testing. So height, weight, wing. You do like a cardio test on the airdyne.
Yeah.
The arm leg fan bike, and you do some strength testing on rowing specific ergometer. So there's a push test, a pull test, and a leg press test, and they have all these standard of numbers. And if you hit these standards, then it's what they deem as having enough potential to fast track you to the Olympics.
Yeah.
And this program was made for, I mean, they had Paralympic standards, but at this point, like I said, I didn't know I'd even qualify for the Paralympics, or classify rather. So I had hit all the able-bodied standards. So I was introduced and I was put into this program for, like, with the rest of the able-bodied athletes. And of course they hype you up a little bit, and the coach was telling me about how much potential I could have if I put my head down and work. And she had a case study with an athlete that she had brought into it before me. Excuse me. But another rower from the university, her name's Carling Zeman. She's still on the national team. Actually, she's the fastest woman in the country, and she's been racing the single for Canada for many years. She was, brought through the same program as that. So she had a bit of a case study, and she showed me that and said, look, like, it works, right?
Yeah.
So that was the motivation that I needed at the beginning to, it was belief that was instilled right away.
Awesome. So it's just kudos to the coach. He would, I would say, right? And I mean, when you have like physical stats in front of you, that always is reassurance, opposed to just someone telling you for the sake, or just saying you can do it, you can do it. When you have the physical stats and it's been done before, obviously, okay, this is possible.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the university rowing team now, correct?
Yep.
And then, so like, is this year 1, year 2 of university?
Yeah. So it's semester. It's halfway through year 1.
Okay, so you get approached.
Yeah.
And then, did you row all 4 years?
I did. Yeah. It took me like 6.5 years to graduate because I was mostly out west. But yeah, I did row. I think I actually have a year of eligibility left, but I rowed 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, and then you started when did they tell you, like, okay, you'd be eligible for like a Paralympic?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm unsure of the exact timeline, but it was somewhere between 8 months and a year in of being introduced to the sport that I was classified. I'm pretty sure a couple months in they were questioning it.
Okay.
and kind of asking physios whether they thought it was a possibility. And then it wasn't until later that I officially got classified.
So once you got classified, then it was like, okay, you can go with this team and start training. So you're with the new team.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it didn't really change much at the time because I
Okay.
was still training with the university team.
Hmm.
But it was because I was with this Road to Podium program. Um, it kind of just directed them into where to direct me, if you will,
Okay.
and what standards they were comparing me against. Um, whether that's the same as what I was comparing myself against, that's a different story. But yeah, so it didn't really change much initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So through timeline here, so you competed 2016. Were you done university or were you still in university?
No, I was still a student.
Still student.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so we kind of had like some of the notes I was looking at. You're like, we talk about balance.
Hmm.
And I mean, when a lot of times you're at this level, national level, athlete, um, things take a priority, and that's mainly
Hmm.
your sport. Um, but you have to create balance, and some people, maybe it's having those couple nights with family and friends just to kind of escape from the sport. um you know Maybe it's alluding to a different activity, or just kind of reading what you kind of put, like maybe you're just all dialed in, and you know it's your tunnel vision and it's sports, and I'm going to
Hmm.
do the best I can at what this is until I retire, or it's over. I can't pursue it anymore.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, walk us
Yeah.
through a little bit about the balance of university and being a high performance athlete.
Yeah. So every year, with the exception of the Paralympic year, I was at university in Sudbury from September to, or sorry, yeah, when was it? I was here from September to January, and then from January to September, I was out in Victoria, BC, training with the national team because that's where the
Oh,
training center is. So I
gotcha.
come back for first semester, row with the university team, do the university circuit, and then do a semester of courses, and then head on out to Victoria, BC to be with the rest of the team. And I was still doing kind of independent studies and some classes that I could still do from a distance, but the workload was drastically reduced. Um, and then the Paralympic year itself, I took that completely off and focused on exclusively rowing. But to go back to your question of balance, I think that's something in hindsight that I could have done a better job with. I
Yeah.
mean, I was all in with sport. I I just had this goal, and I I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't do everything I possibly could to get towards that goal. So I I was you hear a lot of athletes talk about making sacrifices, but at the time it didn't seem like making sacrifices because it was just what I was going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And kind of going back to that performance engine, like sounds like enjoyment, right? You're liking it. That's just what it is, right?
Hmm.
Um, so when did was the goal? So the goal was Olympic gold medal. Was that the goal, or was the goal, you know, um, compete on this national team? Because obviously you have to make the team, right? And stay on it. Like maybe explain a little about the rowing sport, how you make it and how you qualify, just so we have a background on that.
Hmm. Um, to go back even further, again to reference Road to Podium, when they bring you into the program, they tell you about how the program is made to increase the medal count for Canada. So from the moment you're introduced to the sport through that avenue, it's gold medal. And to qualify to get to the games, or even to make the team, so it's all based off of national, like the nationals here in Canada. So there's a time trial, and then there's heat races, finals, that kind of stuff. And you have to be within a certain percentage of the world record pace and the top it depends. It varies every year depending on how many entries there are. But it's usually the top, A, B finals. They'll take a couple from the C final kind of thing. So top dozen type thing they'll take to the training center, and then you'll be a part of the training center.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyone can train at their universities, at their clubs, register for nationals, and if you do super well, you'll get an invite.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's how you make it to the team. And then for every single international race, there's a qualifying process for that too, even if you're at the training center. So say there's 12 people trying out for the 4.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be a series of time trials and seat racing. So basically they'll run through all the combinations in that boat to see what the fastest combination is. And it's not necessarily you're faster in a single or you're the fastest in the single. It's the fastest combination that for that specific boat.
Interesting. That's cool. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where like the team aspect comes into play.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things too with just rowing styles, and you hope at that point that you've been training under the same coach for long enough to the point where our styles are similar, but that has something to do with it as well. It's a big factor in terms of the effectiveness of a team. And then once that team is decided, you compete. We have typically 1 to 2 World Cups a year, a World Championship, and then the Paralympic Games every 4 years, and then a couple local races, kind of national level races.
Gotcha. That's cool. Like I mean, I always say to make it to that level, like it's so difficult, but when you hear like the athlete give you background, like it just puts things into perspective how difficult it is. It's not just like row this time and you're good to go. Like the different steps to qualify to make that team. I just praise the Olympic athletes. It's so difficult. I mean, there's so many different ways to qualify through every different sports, Olympic, Paralympics, and then the sport itself. Like, it's amazing. So I'm glad I got to hear the kind of background because it just goes show the younger athletes like it takes a lot of dedication, hard work, sacrifice, and all that stuff like you guys talk about. So it's good just to hear how you guys get there. So the biggest thing is like Olympian, Paralympic athletes. It's a 4-year process, and you said your goal was that gold medal. So going back to my performance engine, like I said, we have task, mental, physical, then we drop into focus. So focus, I have acceptance, enthusiasm, enjoyment. Okay, so it's an enthusiasm, it's tied with enjoyment, but now you have a vision and goal in mind. But the trick here is not to get too fixated on the big goal, because then we lose sight of the process and the journey to get there. So how do you stay, yes, you have this big goal. How do you stay present and focused on the journey so you don't get too ahead of yourself?
Mm-hmm. I actually just had a conversation just, a couple of days ago with my dad about something similar, but it kind of sounds nihilistic a little bit, but it brings me back to just the thought of none of it matters. Like we put so much importance on everything, on performance and on results and on this and on that, and at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter. None of it matters.
Yeah.
So you can think of that either. There's two ways you can think of that. So it's either it doesn't matter, so I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't matter. I have nothing to lose. Why would I not do my absolute best and try my absolute hardest?
Yeah.
Right. And you can relate this to a lot of things, and whether it's goals and trying to stay present, or back to the mental health thing where it's happiness, or however you want to put it. It's as soon as you put that goal or wanting something outside of the process, you immediately don't have it.
Yeah.
So you're always separate from it.
Yeah.
So as long as it's a goal, or as long as it's something that you want, it's separate, right?
Yeah.
It's not the process.
Yeah.
So it just has to be part of the process. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a bit abstract, but that's the way I think of it.
So it's not abstract. It actually just going through from my background, neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy and stuff. It what you said is completely right. So going back to my performance engine, that enjoyment, when you're enjoying something, it takes out the wanting. Wanting is ego driven. So that's exactly what you're saying. You start to want something, now you're talking with the ego, and then you go down. Your performance can hinder. So you're absolutely right. That's why I'm kind of smiling as you're explaining it, because it, it is. You want to find enjoyment in what you do. And then with high performance athletes, I'm sure you've heard it a lot too, is controllables and uncontrollables. Um, and like you said, the outcome, you can't control the outcome, right? So why even try to get worked up about it? And like you said, just not care and just go out and perform your best, because we don't have control of the end result. And you might race your best race, but there's someone out there who might race just a little bit better, and that's out of your control.
Yep.
So I love what you're saying, because it totally makes sense, and it's good to hear you guys talk about it and put it into context, because you're on what you're saying totally makes sense, for sure. And the one Olympia I talked to said kind of the exact same thing. She's like, yeah, taking out, just not to care anymore. And it sounds, like you said, kind of sounds bad, but it's just taking out that end result and just being fully present. And then kind of I'm not sure if you know much about flow state, but that's kind of the final section of my performance engine, is you then drop into flow where you're fully present, and creativity, motivation, and learning is all enhanced. And that's when we perform our best. So
Absolutely.
I love the stuff that you're talking about. And it's because it is a process. I know there's probably times where, like we talked about, even with your injury, that and learning how to row, times are tough, but to have little check marks, mantras, cues that we allude to help throughout the process, 100%.
Just quickly to go back to the goal thing, I think they're very important to at least set a direction. But to put your entire worth of your sport on this one goal seems kind of ridiculous to me, right? It's the thought of, if this goal wasn't in place, you wouldn't do any of this. So it's such a discrepancy between how much time you train and how much time that goal takes up, right? The goal itself is the one race.
Yeah.
But you're training 4 years for it, longer in most cases. And to say that you would just delete all that time training for this one tiny little moment, I guess it could be kind of controversial, because everyone's training for the goal, but you have to be present, like you mentioned, because without it, then what are you doing? There's no intention with any of it.
I like kind of, I like what you said there. If you just eliminate all that training, hard work for that end result, like, you have to think about like all the relationships, the people you're meeting, and the self work you're doing on yourself, overcoming different types of obstacles, whether it's in sport, physically, mentally. There's so much that's going on, and you're developing as a human being through the process. And do you want to just throw that away and go right to the end? That's I never thought about it that way, but that'd be an interesting question. I might ask that to some athletes to see what they would say. I mean, I'm sure most would say enjoy the process and go through it. But yeah, what if you could just have that end result with that change things? So I like, it's interesting how you put that. I like that. Okay, so now we're talking about goal setting. Now let's get into the Olympics a little bit, because I mean, the Olympics is quite an event, and the Paralympics is quite an event, and the energy and all the hype that goes into it. Maybe walk us through just being there, and being with your teammates, and maybe those couple races that you guys performed.
Well, my experience, 30 seconds walking into the village, I get taken by a chaperone and get drug tested immediately.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
geez.
I think I got drug tested 3 times in the 2 weeks that I was there.
Wow.
But anyways, it was just funny because you get off the plane and then you get onto a bus and the bus brings you to the village and my teammate and I, we walk off the bus and immediately there's chaperones that are like calling out names and well, you have name tags and they'll kind of tap you on the shoulder and be like, you got to come with us. So still have all my stuff with me. Didn't even have a
Yeah.
chance to go to the room or anything. It's immediately to the drug testing spot.
Jeez.
Um, but the experience of being there, it's it's quite hard to describe with words. It's unlike anything, um, and yeah, it was definitely a really 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 high point. And you're so focused in that moment that you don't. It's difficult to conceptualize it and soak it all in the moment because you're so focused on this
Yeah.
goal. Coming back to goals,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's back and forth, but you're so focused the whole time. You have such a strict schedule, and you know exactly what you're doing at every single minute of every day up until the final. So from the point we landed to the final, that's all it was. It was just
Yeah.
focus 100% of the time.
Yeah.
You had little moments in the cafeteria where you could kind of relax for a second and just you stop thinking about everything.
Yeah.
But you walk out and you're walking to the gym to get a training session in, or you're getting your bags ready and getting dressed to jump on the bus to go to the venue and get some training in before your heats. And then once racing starts, it's even dialed up another notch.
So for your sport, one going in, were you guys ranked anywhere particular?
Mm-hmm. So we qualified at the World Championships the year before in 2015, and we were third there. So that was our ranking.
So you guys were, let's say you guys were, people were gunning for you for sure then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
we were expected to win a medal.
okay. And then
Yeah.
so maybe explain before we get into like the final maybe heat. Can you just explain to me how many heats lead up to the final heat?
Yeah. So you're gonna test my memory a little bit. So I was in a Coxed 4, which means that we have someone steering the boat, and they're kind of the director of the whole situation. So thankfully, I had, I could kind of offload all of that logistical weight onto them. But you'll have heats, and then depending on where you place in the first heat, that'll either put you straight to semis or finals. And then if you're in the bottom half of that heat, you'll be sent to a repechage,
Yeah.
which then the repechage is kind of like your last chance to qualify. It's usually top 2. Sometimes it's top 3. And then that'll be the A final. The A final is 6 boats across. So they'll take top 3 from the first heat, and then the bottom 3 will go to the rep. There'll be 2 reps because of all the heats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so that's kind of the pathway to the final. Yeah, you're testing my memory again, but I believe we won our heat and we went straight to finals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so, I won't test. I'll try not to test your memory.
No, go ahead.
But yeah, with regards to like the last heat, but also like being on a team sport, and like we're talking about goals, and you got your self goal, but you're also in a team as well. So, what was kind of the talk, or how'd you guys come together at the right moment, and just like I said, almost like coming into like a flow state. How'd you keep on track? I know, like you said, you had the guy leading the boat, but talk us through, yes, you're an individual, but you're racing with 3 other guys, right?
Yeah, so para rowing is actually pretty unique because it's 2 males, 2 females.
Oh, cool.
And the reasoning behind that is just a numbers thing, to be quite frank. So you can have it depends on, you know, it's all like weighting the disabilities and, yeah, two male, two female in the boat. But going back to your original question of how did we kind of find that synchronicity?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm
Yeah.
understanding properly, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, at the point of the games, it's weighted on all the training that we've done. There's so much
Yeah.
preparation put into it that it's just automatic, right? It's not like something that you really need to think about too much. It's more just clear the mind and do what you know you can do, right?
Yeah. And then do you guys, like for your team, would you guys kind of go off separately and come together, or do you kind of stick together with regards to like just prepping?
Outside of training. Um, we had moments where we would get together and we'd talk about what our plan was. We'd make sure we're all on the same page. You know, there was definitely a common sense of belief in what we were going to accomplish and in what we were set out to do. But of course, there was moments as well where we need time apart as well.
Yeah.
You know, in the village, it's tough because we're all together all the time, anyways. But
Yeah.
you know, you spend time in your room, or you go for a little walk, or you get away for a bit and you read a book somewhere. But yeah, it's a balance. But in those environments, you're together a lot.
Yeah. Try not to butt heads.
Yeah, yeah,
It does come a lot, but I know I hear what you're saying. But
yeah.
yeah, I've heard it before, but like you said, you guys do so much work leading up to it, like you're programmed and you just have to execute that plan. And would you say like once you start rowing, the brain the brain kind of shuts off and it's just autopilot for most part? Or are there like moments in the race where you're actually thinking, saying, I gotta maybe doubt seeping in, or I gotta do something to help my team?
Hmm. I'll speak for myself on this.
Yeah.
There's definitely moments where the pain starts to set in, and you know, there's sometimes a very quick thought, a brief thought of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to push as hard as I want to push based
Yeah.
on how much my legs are hurting right now. But you've done it so many times that you've pushed yourself to the point where you have broke yourself in the past, right? You
Yeah.
know what that line is, and you're just relying on your experience again, knowing what your limits are, and that's why it's so important to completely test those and fail miserably in practice to know where that is.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always like to use the word term fail, because people, when they think of fail, they think more negatively. But I always say first attempt in learning, right?
So important. I'm actually, not to sidestep too much, I'm actually doing a business program right now through Queens, and one of the things that they taught us, you know, for entrepreneurs right off the bat is fail fast.
Yeah, yeah,
Fail
exactly.
early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. You can use my line, first attempt in
Hmm.
learning.
Yeah.
um, that's huge. And sometimes it's a misconception to fail is bad, but it's not, as long as we learn from our mistakes. But it's cool from your point of view, like you're failing to know what your threshold is. So it's like, can I go a little bit more? You know, it's gonna hurt, but you gotta know where you can go in order to go there.
Hmm.
That's so cool. So you kind of talked me through a little bit of the racing stuff. So now, like, just like you said, I know it's hard to describe, but you know, walking away with a bronze medal, you know, representing Team Canada, you have some teammates to share with, family, like what's kind of the feelings you get when someone says that you're a bronze medalist Paralympian?
Hmm. Um, First of all, it's a great feeling. I had a lot of fun with it, and it was an honor to win it for my country to begin with. Um, but maybe an unpopular opinion, I had visualized it so much that it didn't come as a surprise to me.
Yeah.
So when we won it, it was you know, reaffirming what I had visualized. Um, you know, gold, silver, bronze, we were in that position, whatever it was. Um, it wasn't a shock. So it didn't feel like, oh my God, like we did this. I can't believe we did
Yeah.
this. Don't get me wrong, it was a great feeling, but it was it, like I said, yeah, it's visualized so many times for so long that
Yeah.
it made sense.
And when you talk about visualization, was this something you practiced or meditated on, or was it just something that was like unconsciously known?
It started as unconscious, but then once you get into higher level sport, you have um, help with that, right? You're taught to visualize. You know, you're put through the process of practicing. You're given, you know, steps on how to do it and how to visualize. But I think I've always kind of done it, even in the days of racing dirt bikes way back when.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually where I realized the power of visualization, because of how it can go both ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're in a negative loop of thinking about crashing, it
Yeah.
usually happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the same for the positive outcome as well.
Right. Yeah. I always use my playing hockey. Um, you know, don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. And sure enough, you go out there, you make a mistake. Right.
Yeah.
It's
So look where you want to go.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
the power of thought and visualization is, I think, huge. And in the realm of work I do, like sports performance, I think it's so nice to like this stuff is getting brought more so now to the surface with regards to mental health, self care, and people just, I guess, believing in it more per se. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I always say like I like doing this podcast because you guys talk about it and are sharing it. And now you have coaches that are helping you with this because it's so powerful, especially in a Paralympic Olympic journey where it's 4 years plus, like you're saying. So I just love the fact that I get to talk to athletes and they share these experiences and but just to go to show you the importance of it all and prepping the mind um, for when you compete. Well, that's man. As you're taking on this journey, I kind of have to take a deep breath because I can kind of feel the intensity when you're telling the stories. It tends to happen quite a bit, so I also have to like calm down after I do the show.
Yeah.
But I'll kind of like lead us out here a little bit because I know you've now transitioned into a new career and found a new passion and love. It seems like just from following a little bit of your social media.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to kind of just describe, you know, what you kind of do now for just other people to hear and follow you
Yeah.
along your new journey.
Yep. Yep. So I started, I guess, well, 2017 when I retired, um, to dabble with the camera a little bit, and that led, you know, one thing led to another, and I've been working in the film industry for 4 years now as a cinematographer, um, and you know, making making pretty big moves this year. Especially, I'm partnering with another design agency, and we're starting up a production company, and we're planning on doing it as properly as possible. You know, and yeah, it's another thing that I'm diving headfirst into, and it's I see a big opportunity to create change with it. And you know, it's cliche to say, but the world is pretty digital nowadays, and
Yeah,
we watch a lot of things on screens.
yeah,
So there's a big opportunity there to have an impact in telling other people's stories,
yeah.
telling stories that don't often get to see the light of day. And I just really enjoy it. I love the creative process of it. I love, you know, coming up with an idea and making it a real thing.
Yeah.
You know, having it as just a thought, laying in bed, can't sleep because your mind's racing about something, right? And then 6 months down the road or whatever, it's a short film or it's a documentary or whatever it is. It's to me, it's very tangible, and I really enjoyed that about it.
That's awesome. And like kind of you saying that visualization and all that, the process, the journey is all kind of it's just the next instead of your sports now the film and all this. So it's good to see it's transitioned over. And I mean, with athletes, sometimes it's hard to find the next thing, right? Career wise, you know, sometimes athletes have a hard time finding their purpose because all they've done is eat, sleep, and train. Um, so I mean, kudos to you that you found a passion, something you enjoy doing because it's not always easy when you spend all those times um,
Yeah, I
training.
appreciate it. It definitely wasn't without a lot of contemplation and is this it? Is it not it? You know, is this worth it? There's a ton of, you know, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying doubts, because I'm aware, you know, I've been taught, I've proven to myself that I can accomplish things.
Yeah,
So it was just, yeah, it was definitely a process, but I found it for sure. Yeah.
that's awesome. And I just want to kind of wrap this up through quite the journey we've had talking to you here, and the messages, advice, and stories that you've shared with us. You've gone beyond my expectations of what I thought it could be. And being a Paralympian, I think it's great to have athletes talk and explain their story, because like you were kind of alluding at the very beginning, everyone has a story, very unique. So I'm glad we got to touch on, the goal setting, the process, visualization, it all coming together. And then I think we alluded on it a little bit, is like just the universe having a path for us, even though we don't sometimes think we're on it. There's a purpose behind everything that's happening. And in your case, a negative thing has turned quite positive and is growing in your next chapter of life. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.